All right. Yesterday we began learning this Sicha, a speech that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave. A speech is not really a nice word, but I guess you can't. I mean, he didn't like stand up and walk around dramatically on the stage. It was a discourse. What I call a discourse, whatever. And he gave it to his Hasidim. This was in 1951. Now, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away in 1950 at the age of 70 years old. 1950. And we talked a lot about him, but his whole life was one of total self-sacrifice, his whole life. And especially after he became the Rebbe, which was in 1920. So in 1920, he became the Rebbe. His father passed away, the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, Tafresh Pei. His father passed away, and he immediately became the Rebbe. So at that time, he was 40 years old. And shortly thereafter, he was arrested and put into prison. That was, his father passed away when communism was just taking, right? It's just organizing itself and taking hold in Israel and in Russia. And the previous Rebbe's father, that was called the Rebbe Shalom Dovber, the Rashab. He was the fifth Rebbe of Chabad. He said that he's not able to stand against the communists. The evil is too great. It's too low. It's too low of a type of evil. And he said he can't, and he gave that job over to his son. So when the son took over, he took over just as, communism was rising. So, one of the big things that communism was it was forbidden to have any other ideology. You couldn't have any other ideology except for communism. Communism was the ultimate good. Anything that was, anything that deviated from communism obviously was going against the ultimate good. So with that logic, and the people accepted it. With that logic, they won. They won the battle. There's a huge battle over power after the Tsar was deposed. And then they ruled over all of the educational system. And they convinced everybody to pledge total allegiance, heart and soul. Excuse me, just one second. I want to put this down here. There we go. To pledge total allegiance, heart and soul, to communism. And Stalin was killing people right and left. Like we said before, he killed tens of millions of people, and everybody loved him. And in this atmosphere, so to get out of Russia was almost impossible. That was why it was called the Iron Curtain. And the Rebbe didn't want to leave. He didn't want to leave Russia. He wanted to stay with his Hasidim, and even more, he wanted to save the Jews that were falling prey to communism. So, the Rebbe in 1947, the Rebbe was 47 years old. 19 to 27, he was imprisoned, and he was sentenced to death, like we say. And then miraculously, the world Jewry started to write letters to Stalin, and Stalin wanted to show that he was a nice guy. So he eventually saw to it that the Rebbe would get out. And then there's a incredibly long story. The Rebbe finally, they evicted him like a couple months later, however long it was. And he went to Poland and etc. Okay, now the Rebbe though got out in Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. And the Hasidim made a tremendous holiday from this. And especially, like we said before, the Rebbe was not just the leader of the Hasidic Jews or of the religious Jews or of the Russian Jews. The Rebbe was the leader of all Judaism. And in fact, the Rebbe was in fact the leader of the world, because Jews are the chosen people to rule over the world. What does it mean, rule over the world? To convince everybody that there's God and everybody should do what God wants, right? What do the Jews want? Nothing. They don't want anything from themselves. They're not interested in everybody's money and everybody's this. They're not interested. That's the way it's supposed to be. I think that's sort of the way it is, except for okay. So the Jews are supposed to be woken up. I mean, you see how the situation is with Judaism now, but in 1 second, it's all going to change because that's the truth. Right? Like I told you the story about the person who suddenly realized, wow, this is my brother. But he was about to kill him, and he said, wow, this is my brother. I can't do it. And woken up, realized some connections. The Jewish people suddenly realized, wow, this is God. Okay, so they made a big holiday. So they made a big holiday. Okay, let's see a little bit over here. All right, let's explain something. The Rebbe explained he took from a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that said if you can make new holidays, and we see that they did make holidays, and after the destruction, anyway, we made a new holiday on the miracle that happened, and it happened in Russia, and it happened in the time of the exile, in the time of Gezerat Hashmad, when there was they were trying to destroy Judaism. And there's something like what happened with Hanukkah, even though Hanukkah was in the time of the Holy Temple. But here we have, after the temple was destroyed, the Gemara over there talks about. In any case, you can make, there used to be a book called Megillat Tainis, the book of holidays that you're not allowed to fast on. And some people say that there's no such thing anymore, and that there is such a thing, and you can make a holiday, make a holiday. Anyway, they decide that yes, you can. You can make new holidays, and this is one of them, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, until it gets spread out to all of the Jewish people, this holiday of Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz, when the Rebbe got out of communist prison. Bir Enyan. Nisba'er, we explained before, the Nogel in Nisyonos, the whole idea of tests, what do you want to call it? Tribulations, difficulties in life. When God puts a person to the test, like Abraham had said, went through 10 tests. That's the basis of Judaism. Are these tests, is the word, I don't know, a better word. God put Abraham through 10 tests. A test basically is a proof that God does not exist, or that God does not care, or that God is not good, or that God is not almighty. Right? These are proofs. And you have to ignore this proof. That's called a test, a nisyon. A person experiences difficulty, right? He just did a big commandment. All of a sudden, he loses his wallet. Why do things like happen to this to me? Why? A big test shakes a person's, the essence of his soul. Nisayon. How did it say? These are the times that try men's souls. It shakes a person's soul. Will you be steadfast and still believe in what you believe or not? Test. It's a test. What about tests? So it says God put us into the world in order to elevate the world. There's positive commandments, there's negative commandments. There's prohibitions, there's things that you shouldn't do. You have a big desire to do something, right? If it's the Torah says you're not supposed to do it, then don't do it. Right? You have a big desire to eat a piece of cake on Yom Kippur. What could be wrong with eating a piece of cake? It's a kosher cake. You don't want to eat a lot, but it's Yom Kippur today. So you have to not do it. That's called a negative command. What's a nisayon? What's a test? Right? What is called a test? A test is something you can't walk away from. A negative commandment you can walk away from. A test is something you can't walk away from. It's put on top of a person. It says that why does God send a person such terrible things? Why? Because that there's a spark of godliness which is in this test. Hu behelim behester gadol bioter. It is tremendously concealed. And we said that the whole point of this world is that God wants us to reveal him in this concealment. The whole word for world is the same word for concealment. That's the whole trick. God put the Jews in the world in order to reveal the good that's hidden in the world. And world means concealment. And there's what conceals God more than anything else? Difficulties, pain. God forbid we should never have such a thing. That's why we pray. We pray 3 times a day that we shouldn't have these terrible tests, that God should reveal these sparks or whatever he has to in a way that we don't suffer. But nevertheless, sometimes it happens. And when it does happen, Shehu kamo chatichas atzmo Nasan Avela, until it comes to a point where the world itself seems to be totally bad. There's a law, Chaticha Nasan Avela, that if you a little bit of certain forbidden things fall into a mixture of food, right, then the whole entire piece becomes forbidden. The example is you have 60 ounces of milk, and there falls in a little bit more than 1 ounce of meat, and then you take the meat out. So all that milk is totally forbidden. It's totally forbidden. There's no way. And if that milk falls into another pot, you have to have 60 times against all the milk. That's called chaticha nasanan. So sometimes it can be that there's a little bit of bad in the world, and that little bit of bad turns the whole entire situation to totally bad. But on the other hand, when you reveal this little spark of godliness, which is concealed in the world, not by means of serving God, by means of shaklavatara, thinking and logically figuring out what you have to do, by means of this, but a Jew arouses in himself a bittul, a total surrender. And the tokef atzman is tremendous power. We said that's a stiff neck, right? We just finished learning. I'm not asking any questions, I'm not making any deals, right? I'm not going to bow down to an idol. Azai then nase shavir is a clipper. That's what breaks the power of concealment in the world. That's what breaks the confusion of the world. And there's revealed a spark of godliness. This is a tremendous light. Like we see in the tremendous light, which breaks through and shines even even in sort of a deep pit. Even though the very deep pit, it's so tremendously deep, and to the point where even the air there is mufash. It says there's some places where you light a candle, even the candle won't light up. The air is so thick and foul. Nevertheless, if it's a big light, if somebody shines a really big light from above, as it can break through durach shparan, it can break through into this tremendous deep darkness. Similarly, it also is a miracle which was made at miracles which occur now after the destruction of the temple, in the time of exile, outside of Israel. In the time of the temple, so people knew that there was a holy of holies and that God used to reveal himself. People used to go up 3 times a year, they would feel the godliness. So when there was bad times, when there was this, so there was people had desires, they had all sorts of questions, the difficulties. They saw the non-Jews were succeeding. They saw that idolatry was very appealing in those days. So it was a big test, but it was nothing like when there's no holy temple and people don't see any godliness, and their parents and their grandparents didn't see. And not only that, they're not even in Israel. They're outside of the land of Israel. And now the land of Israel is outside of the land of Israel, what goes on over here. So this is a matzav as gezerus kashas. There's tremendously difficult decrees. Sheneis kazed. This indicates on the greatness of the light which is concealed inside of this darkness. Because there's a better type of light which comes from darkness. Therefore, it must be that this light has concealed in it a power to shine up in the place of darkness. And this, what can shine up this darkness? The self-sacrifice of a Jew. And automatically, it's not amazing that in the time of exile and the darkness, double darkness, that we can have another holiday. Because 2 things happen. Because it was such a dark situation that they could actually put the Rebbe and so many Jews into prison and God forbid to kill them, it shows that there must be something tremendously high. It's such a tremendous, like the Holocaust. The Holocaust arouses in a normal person's mind 1,000,000 questions, right? And Stalin, maybe even more questions. Because the Holocaust, there was a guy stood up and he hated the Jews. He said he hated the Jews, and in the name of his country, he was going to kill Jews. So that, the question is, how did this evil person win? That's the big question. But with Stalin, he loved everybody. All the people loved him. Like I say, in Israel, there was his pictures were on kibbutz on the walls. There's people that still believe in it. Right? And he was going to be the father of equality and liberty and the love and brotherhood and progress and opportunity, every good thing. There was never a movement that had more good slogans than this did, right? Than communism did, right? And inside of this was the darkest, most evil forces could possibly be. Hitler, at least he killed strangers. Stalin killed his own people that believed him, he killed them. So this is a darkness. There's never been such a deep darkness like this. In a way, let's not talk about it too much, but the Torah, like it says in the Torah Chasidus, from the normal light of God, which is in any level of creation, that this shined in the holy temple. Remember, that's what we just finished learning in the Mimer, that there's the heavens, these levels of heaven. All these levels of heaven, they shined in the holy temple. But from those levels, lo shayach lahosif yomim tovim, you couldn't make any new holidays after the holidays that were negated beforehand. Kaima bitl achrion. So it says that it says over in the Gemara that there was this book of holidays called Sefer Tainus, and that this book, it says that it was negated. There's no more new holidays. It says when the temple was destroyed, so it says you want to get rid of the old holidays and you want to make new holidays now. How can it possibly be? So the Rebbe says yes, because now that we're in exile, the darkness itself shows that there's a tremendously deep new light hidden inside of all this darkness. The fact that communism was so terrible shows that there was some tremendous high light, but the only way it could be revealed was the self-sacrifice of a Jew, or free will. Of a mitzvah, or that's the light which is totally above the whole order of creation. That's what we just finished learning in the Mimer, right? Afasisi was it. Shemedgal, that's revealed by means of the concealment. Ain pellets, nothing amazing. Shenit fosit, that we can make another holiday. Or a more detail. What about this holiday of Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz? At that time, there was such a tremendous concealment. Kamudgash b'kach sha'maisa shel Rebbe was kashur in Yehudi davka. This imprisonment of the Rebbe was only because he did Jewish things. Like the saying, which was, like the saying that was, which the Hasidim always say regarding Yud Tes Kislev. Now, Yud Tes Kislev was the holiday when the first Rebbe of Chabad, he was imprisoned by the Tsar, which was a totally different type of evil. He was imprisoned by the Tsar, and miraculously he got out. Yud Tes Kislev, he got out. Shekiv and Shayahelam Behester, since it was concealment and was called the Pnimius Torah, the concealment then was on the ideas of Chassidut. If you know the story of Yud Tes Kislev, I don't want to go into it too much, but Yud Tes Kislev, the main thing, the Tsar and those people, they were believers. They really believed in God. Okay, they got it wrong, but you can't blame them, right? You can't blame them. But nevertheless, they believed in God. They were believers in God. And when they really revealed, and they also believed in a certain way in justice. They really believed in justice. And okay, they had maybe a little bit of a twisted idea of what justice was, but it wasn't like Stalin that he was lying totally about what justice was. He had no concept of it. They had a value for people and the value. Okay, so when the first Rebbe of Chabad, he was put into prison by religious Jews. Religious Jews went to the Tsar and they forged papers saying that he was making a war against the Tsar. As soon as the Tsar realized that it wasn't true, and that then the Rebbe got out. But in the first Rebbe of Chabad, he was taken. It wasn't as severe as the previous Rebbe. He was sentenced to death. The first Rebbe was not actually sentenced to death. It was hanging over his head. The sentence was hanging over his head, but he wasn't actually. And therefore, because the concealment was the pnimis Torah, the inner Torah, right? Therefore, it couldn't be. It had to be by means of a Jew. Because a non-Jew has faith in God, but he hasn't got faith above faith. In other words, a non-Jew will not sacrifice his life unless there's some power or other he's going to get something out of it. He's going to go to heaven. It'll be but it had to be by means of a Jew. So it is in Yud Beis Tammuz. Just like the first Rebbe, he had to sit in prison because it had to be a Jew that revealed this high level of godliness. So also Yud Beis Tammuz. Shagam Az then, it had to be by means of Jews. I'm sorry. I understand what's going on. I'm sorry. I understand. The first Rebbe, I'm sorry. I made a little mistake. The first Rebbe of Chabad was put into prison by means of Jews. Right? There were religious Jews that they really believed, they call themselves misnagdim, and they believed that the Rebbe's ideas were detrimental to Judaism. Anyway, they were the ones that actually put the Rebbe into prison. Why? Because it was the darkness had to come from a Jew. Only a Jew could make such darkness. Same thing as with the previous Rebbe. The previous Rebbe, who put the previous Rebbe into prison? Who were the ones that arrested him? Who were the ones that ran after him? Jews. And some of them were even Chabad Hasidim. They had left Judaism. That was called the Yevtsektia. Mitzad Gadol Helam, because of the tremendous concealment over the hidden Torah. So in other words, it had to be that the evil was total concealment. Even Jews were involved in the evil. And by the previous Rebbe, even more. Omnan Mitzad is Galus Etzam and the Rebbe. But in order for the Rebbe to be revealed, Bittul Atzmi, V'tokav Atzmi, namely the surrender of the essential surrender and the essential power, like we said, the stiff-necked people, that in order that this could come into the test, that the victory of the Rebbe was such that even the GPO, whatever the KGB, the secret police of the communists, then they came to a realization that you have to release the Rebbe. And not only did they release the Rebbe, but they released the Rebbe biyad Ramah, in an advertised way that they wanted the whole world to know that they were releasing it. And not only that, that after a course of time, hodu b'kach shedavka al yadam nitvosef etzel chasidim od yom tov. They even were happy. He's going to tell a story that they caught other Jews, and the other Jews for other reasons. And they said, "What are you so worried about? That we caught you and we put you into prison and we're torturing you. In the end, you're going to make another holiday like the Lubavitchers did." Okay, so here also we see that in Yud Beis Tammuz, what happened in Yud Beis Tammuz, that the Rebbe was announced that he was free, but the offices were closed, and there came a special order from high up. I don't know, from Stalin himself, from Beria, I don't know, one of these high officials. You have to release him, give him a letter that he's released as soon as possible. Moshiach Zaman, after the time of Yud Beis Tammuz, here, this is the story. There were other great rabbis who were put into prison, and when they said to them, they said, the rabbi said, "Listen, we didn't do anything wrong." The GPO, the secret police said, "What are you so worried about? Right? Why are you so afraid of being put into prison? By means of this, you're going to give another holiday." That's what happened to the Lubavitchers, right? Let me just finish the story, because this is a very good story. Now it says, that's what it says. The Rebbe wrote in his letter, and this is what Yisro said. Yisro said, "Now I know that God is greater than all of the other gods in the world. That idolatry works. Idolatry, a person that believes in idols, as he gets success. What's the question? Of course he does. Right? Look at the church. Look at these tremendous success a person can get. That's the whole story. Reading the story. Pesel Micha, the statue of Micha. That they worship this little idol because it brought people success. This is in the time when the Jews left Egypt. It brought people success. It says, but what? When the people saw that the Lubavitcher Rebbe got out, he was public enemy number one against Stalin, who was the public murderer number one in the world, and that the Lubavitcher Rebbe went out of prison and the communists helped them. This is an amazing miracle. No. This also, we find another miracle that happened when the Rebbe was in prison. I'll have to read this quickly because we're getting near to the end of the time. The Rebbe told the story that when he was in prison, he was in prison like for 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks in actual prison. 2 weeks, I guess, he was in prison. Anyway, in the course of the time, there was Shabbat. So it said that he demanded that they give him his tefillin and his talis. Anyway, he was sitting in Shabbat. They came into his room in order to film him, to make a picture of him. Now, in those days, in the 20s, it wasn't you couldn't make a camera. Wasn't like a small portable thing. They had to set up the camera. They had to arrange it. However they did. According to the law of Russia, there had to be in the offices of the prison a Tammuz, a picture, a photograph of every prisoner. That was the law. And since for whatever reason it was, they didn't film the Rebbe. They didn't make a picture of the Rebbe when they brought him. And the night that he brought him in, they were supposed to kill him. And anyway, whatever happened, they didn't take a picture. They didn't take a photograph of him. That was called into so they went into his cell. It was called a cell into his cell. As bullet, someone they came to film him, to make a picture. At that time, it says the Rebbe, this was like 2 or 3 in the afternoon on Shabbat, or something like that, 4 o'clock after. The Rebbe was praying, and he was praying with his talis over his head, over his face. When they came into his room, there was a whole group of them that came in order to take this photograph. They saw him sitting with his talis over his face as they left. They left. I guess the Rebbe must have heard them coming in. He heard them opening up the door. Maybe he saw their feet, whatever, and they lowered it, and he thought, okay, whatever, who knows what they're going to do? They left. After a little bit of time, an hour or something like that, so the Rebbe didn't say how much time, as they came another time, and the Rebbe was still in the middle of prayer, but this time his talis wasn't covering over his face. When he saw them, and they came in with all of their cameras and everything, that's mit dem ganzen Klepper Getzeg. With all the cameras were a big thing. They had to put a tripod on, and they had the lighting and everything. So he just made a motion with his hand, like, go away. Amal Gitanis with his hand. When they saw that he can't stop, so they got scared and they left. After another hour or whatever, so they came back a third time. Then the Rebbe said to them, right, he wasn't praying. The Rebbe said, what's wrong with you fellas? It's Shabbos. It's forbidden for me to take a picture on Shabbos. When they heard that, they left. They left. And they put the photograph off to another time. What do we see? An amazing thing. These people, what do they care about? A talis. A talis. They shouldn't have been affected at all by seeing a Jew sitting in a talis. Exactly the opposite. They put him into prison because he was a rabbi. Because he was a rabbi that was covered with a talis. What's the reason for that? That when they saw the Rebbe, when the Rebbe was by them, and they all of a sudden they became afraid, they left, because when they were near the Rebbe, they saw Shekulam Shur. What's this? Anyway, when they saw that there was the Rebbe was near them in the same room, Makam she'ein bo mezuzah, and it was even a place where there was no mezuzah. Shekulam Shor says, right, that there were the places where all these evil people were. When they saw this holiness there, they became scared. They saw that the Rebbe was sitting in a talis over his face in such a place which was, it says there were rats there and terrible, that they left. They understood that they have nothing to do. How? They have no place. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But why? Why did it happen? Mitzara Atzmus Shel Rebbe, because the essence of godliness that was revealed in the Rebbe. That the Rebbe was so totally devoted to God. I mean, normally they beat him up and everything. But now the Rebbe was praying, and because he was totally, they saw that he was totally devoted to Hashem. So therefore, Nitpal Gam Metziut Kazu, that even such creations as themselves, that the godliness was totally concealed. La'ofen shechaticha nasan avela, that they became totally ungodly, right? That there was no spark of godliness visible there at all. But nevertheless, the fact is, says the Rebbe, that there is a spark. That when they saw even such a low people as these photographers, I mean, they were all the people who worked in the prisons, they were all murderers. They murdered people, no problem. They said, oh, right, Joe didn't come today, Ivan didn't come today, right? Stanislav, you go and kill the people tonight. But when they saw the essence of the Rebbe, when he was praying, like he was sitting in talis over his head, then suddenly something happened to them that it was impossible for them. Not logical, because by them, this was a thing that had no place in intellect. They didn't know what they were saying. I think exactly the opposite. If it would have been Jews that went in, it could have been that they would have, anyway. Linasot Baalbel says they couldn't run away or anything like that. Kevin Shakan mitbatalet mitziutam. Oh, suddenly their whole existence became surrendered. They realized suddenly that they were just creations. Their mitzias verenda ois mitzias. They became like not themselves. Lozu bilvaj enam mebalbalim. Not only that they didn't come confused or anything, but even more, that they actually left the place. Right? That they saw the Rebbe, they became confused. No, they ran away when they saw that they haven't got what to do here. So we see that by having a strong stance and being connected to God, that it actually changes the world around him, and that he revealed the good in him. And we see that what happened now. I mean, I'm not a politician or anything, but you can see now the system of government in Russia is incomparable to what it was in the time of Stalin. Incomparable, despite what the Western the media wants to say. He's an evil guy and this, right? You can say what you want to, but the fact of the matter is that the government in Russia now, it encourages religion, it encourages Judaism. There's Chabad houses all over in Russia. He praises, right, Judaism. There was never such a thing in the history of the world, and this was all brought about by the Lubavitcher Rebbe sitting in prison and not paying any attention to the evil, only bringing out the good. And of course, he suffered terribly because of this. But here we see something interesting, that the Rebbe was really in control of the whole business. The Rebbe, when he wanted to, they left. Right? So whatever happened, what the Rebbe went through was only in order to reveal this spark of godliness that was there, something like Abraham. That's why we can have the story of Abraham in the Torah, and the Torah was written before the world was created. How can it be there? Because the only way that it can reveal good in the world is by doing something that's eternal. So what Abraham did is eternal. It makes no sense, but he did it with his own free will and revealed the essence of God, because it also makes no sense why God is creating us, right? If I was God, I don't think I would create me. A person like me, what's the point? Right? The point is that God is not understandable. And to reveal this, that's an incredible, infinite good, especially in a place what's so dark, is it takes something really, really unusual, and that's called self-sacrifice, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. But let's do the Yom Yom first of all. Yom Yom, okay? Here we go. In the Tanya, it says the first version of the Geras HaTshuva was printed. It's not divided into chapters, and there are differences from one text to the other. How can I get to? Here it is. Look at this. Why didn't I see this yesterday? Today. What did I just read? I see. That's okay. I don't know what this is. Okay, let's go. In the early period of the leadership of the Alter Rebbe, he taught the footsteps of man are directed by God. Wherever a Jew comes to any place, no matter what, even if he thinks it's by mistake, he misses his bus or whatever, it's for an inner divine purpose, to perform a mitzvah, whether a mitzvah between man and God, a mitzvah between man and his fellow man. A Jew is God's messenger. Wherever a shliach may be, he represents the one who sent him. The superior quality the soul possesses, higher than the angels, is that souls are messengers of God by virtue of the Torah. So wherever you are, you're never there by accident, no such thing. God has sent you there. Here's yesterday. The greatest assurance of divine assistance for all the Jewish parents in need of special help for the children is supporting. You want your children to come out good, support the learning of Torah. That was yesterday. Have a good day with Moshiach now, God willing, at 3 o'clock. I hope. Yes, 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock today, we're learning Chumash. Have a good day. Shalom uvracha.